Should we arrest people for being smelly? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Now, here's a thought.
A whiff of social conscience. Good hygiene is about keeping clean, whether washing in a shower or sink. But if life's routine is on the street scene, it may cause a social stink.
Yeah.
Well, remarkably, a bill in the Commons could criminalise rough sleepers if they cause a nuisance, or more importantly, are deemed to have excessive smells. Yes, this is not a joke, folks. In fact, more than 10 Conservative MPs are backing changes to ensure that action is only taken against those people who are begging and not just sleeping rough. However, the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, has said that the most important thing was to support people to get them off the streets. Well, it's all very well, but the fact is, should we be penalising them for those who are living on the streets? And let's be fair, it's not necessarily something of their own doing, and simply arrest them because they are causing a stink on the streets. Clergyman Pete, I ask you, what you're getting a sense of the way that the government is thinking today. Is this a sensible act that should be enforced in Britain today?
Well, it's interesting, and I do sympathise with the idea of certain people people on the street being too smelly. I understand how if that's the case, it can be unpleasant for other people, and so they're affecting other people. So this should be taken into account. I worked years ago in a small library in Britain, and there was a man who used to come in very smelly and sit and read the papers. And the chief librarian threw him out on one day because he was taking the head lice from his hair and cracking them open on the table on the books. And I thought that was going a bit far, and so he was thrown out. He was and he was very smelly, and smelliness does make things unpleasant for other people. However, when you introduce something like that, just think about who you're introducing it to. You're introducing it for people who are on the street, and so may not have access to the facilities in order to keep themselves clean, and that's why they were smelly in the first place. So I think if you're going to introduce such legislation, a little bit of a organisation, bit of preparation will be to make sure that there were places available to keep yourself clean. Now, I live in Merseyside, where not that long ago, well, we're going back a half a century for it to be very common, there used to be public showers on most streets or group of streets.
Yeah.
And where I live, which is near to Guinea Gap swimming baths, it's still quite common for people in the streets where I live to go down to Guinea Gap for their showers. They go and use that rather than, they may well have showers in your home. In the home, most homes now have all the modern appliances, don't they? But
they do.
Still will do that. We'll go down there because it's been the habit passed down through the years. So that if those were available, you went back to having that available, then I think that would at least make it a logical step. But as you can see, what I'm really saying, you're really attacking it from the wrong end. As though, let's put it this way: some people choose to be homeless, but from the majority, by far the majority, you can look at research on this. Most people who are living on the streets or homeless, as in don't have a permanent home, it's not their choice. Oh, by the way, I must ask a question. You were talking about that report that the new law coming through. Do you know, does it apply to the homeless or simply to people on the street?
Primarily, indeed, and it's not very clear.
Homeless just means you don't have a permanent home.
Indeed.
So you could actually be sleeping in a house. Yeah.
It's basically rough sleepers, or primarily, I guess, anyone who is deemed to be a nuisance and smelly. Now, I don't want to sort of get into the the gratuitous detail of this, but what is deemed to be smelly? Here's the point. That you could argue, in a complete counter to this, that when you look at society, there are lots of smelly people, and they may be actually quite affluent. the fact is that it doesn't necessarily mean that just because they're living on the streets that they are smelly. Now, the fact is that what do you have to do? Have a scale of smelliness? I mean, the whole thing seems ridiculous. Now, according to a Liberal Democrat MP, Layla Moran, she was saying that she was leading a campaign to scrap the Vagrancy Act. And this whole government proposal was heartless, essentially. What she said was that the government should listen to their own backbenchers and take a compassionate approach to tackling homelessness instead of stigmatizing and criminalizing rough sleepers. Quite right. But again, it comes back to what is deemed to be smelly. Now, I would argue that why don't we have another act, which is for those who are, should we say, a bit opulent, in another way, over pungent from, let's say, having too much Yves Saint Laurent splashed all over the place. That in itself, it could be, should we say, a social stigma. I mean, there's a case for it. Why not? There are a lot of wealthy people, and they certainly flaunt it and splash it about. So here's the point then. If we are to monitor and measure this, to me, the whole idea is that the government seems to have lost the plot a little bit. Now, I understand about nuisance and I understand about criminal acts and damage and violence on the streets. Clearly, that's got to be stopped. But really, again, to our friends in government, I think that really their priorities should lie elsewhere. Definitely tackling homelessness. I agree with what Layla Moran was saying. That's really where we should be trying to put the efforts rather than stigmatizing those with smelly armpits. But Clergyman Pete, I ask you, now I know that you've mentioned in the past that you've had rough sleepers come to your church. And how should society treat them? To put a legislation in place and deem them and ostracize them in some way. I mean, you can't exactly charge them, fine them, because they probably haven't got enough money. I think criminalizing them, putting them in prison is the bad thing. So what should we do with these people?
Well, I believe that a fine is one of the punishments that is part of this bill. I think I'm correct.
Well, indeed, but where do they get the money?
Yeah. So now, as I say, I've had some experience of this, and I do think there are certain standards. As people come in smelly into church, we're not going to be throwing them out, but I would certainly speak to them if it were repeat offence, because you just make it can be so unpleasant for other people and unhygienic, of course, and spreading disease and all that sort of thing, which we generally don't approve of. And so I do understand. I do agree that it's something that should be tackled. But the fact that it's come to the fore that it seems to need to be tackled, to me, says more about the problem we're having with rough sleepers and homelessness.
Yes.
The fact that it's come to that state. But no, I don't think it's acceptable for people to be so smelly that it's unhygienic and just horrible for people around. So I do think something needs to be done. But being fined isn't the answer. It's sort of, you've got to come up with some sort of punishment. Maybe they just have to have a public shower or something.
Well, you mentioned that. I mean, that's a public service, and that's a very good measure, isn't it? So for those who
hose them down.
Yeah, well, give them a bar of soap. Yeah, no, but seriously, I mean, the fact is that if those type of facilities were more readily available, then it would at least give people an opportunity, a sanctuary, to be able to at least keep themselves, in a hygienic state, and that would be good. But again, it comes back to this bigger picture, which is, surely what we should be doing is giving those people opportunities to get back on their feet, to get a job, to earn money, to be able to afford to pay, whether they're going to rent or whether they're going to eventually buy a property or something like that. But surely just simply having them on the street, kicking them down the road, fining them, putting them in prison, or etc., is not really the solution. It's got to be about how can we find ways of getting them into areas where they can bring back their own dignity, essentially. Now, whether that be working in a trade, whether that be working in specific industries that need labor. There are many of which we know, whether it be in farming, whether it be agriculture, basically, or whether it be in manufacturing and many other things. There is a need for this, and we've already identified that there is a dearth of good people who are willing to do certain types of jobs. but it is an opportunity for people to get off the street. So to me, and I very much agree with what the charity Crisis said, and urge, this is what they were saying, is they urge the Home Secretary to listen to MPs and drop these cruel and unnecessary measures, effectively putting in yet another legislation to sort of charge somebody simply because they stink. That, to me, is not really tackling, it's tackling the symptom and not the cause.
Yes,
and that,
but also,
that's
yes,
where I think that the government needs to change its view.
Unnecessary extra law to be
Yeah.
seen to be doing something. Because if people are causing a nuisance on the street, there are other laws that are available in order to deal with them. And the problem comes, though, a problem comes though, if you put into place things like, you go on this program, or there's an opportunity to get into certain types of jobs, we'll get you off the street in that way. There comes a point when people refuse to do it. So in the end, you do have to have some sort of enforcement, maybe prison, that sort of thing. But I would say that's the next level. If people, you get people to do something like a job in return for a bed and that sort of thing.
Yes. You incentivize the people.
Yes. But then they, for the few who actively refuse to do that, then there's another level. Because in the end, when you put in a law into place, you need to enforce it, or it's just a pointless law, and it becomes a laughing stock.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what our public think, and what do the listeners think here? Do they know people who are on their streets? Have they got a whiff of social conscience? I wonder.
Yes. Well, let us know. Go to markandpete.com. Just check you're subscribed, and then if you are, you can just comment on this and every episode. But for Mark and myself, it's bye for next week, and till next week, and smile you later.